Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Mary. And in fact, Mary has two questions which are linked. And her questions are these. Are dolls more likely to be haunted than any other object? And Mary asked this question because apparently a book either has just been published or is on the edge of being published, which makes this assertion. And she would like me to comment upon it. The second question is, how common are actual hauntings versus poltergeists? And can I explain the difference between these? And anyone who has a background in these matters will immediately notice that Mary must as well, because of the way she has asked this, and already knows this difference, but would like me to comment upon it for those who do not. And that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to start with the first question about dolls. Are dolls more likely to be haunted than any other object? Not in my experience. And I've been in the metaphysical community for more than 40 years. This has not been my experience. And I will demonstrate it to you very simply by suggesting that you go and look through the history of haunted experiences, which you can find all over the place, and look for how many stories there are of haunted dolls. And what you'll find is there aren't very many. Therefore, they cannot possibly be more likely to be haunted than anything else, or there would be lots and lots and lots of stories about it. There are not. Even if you count the more dubious stories, there still aren't very many. And if you count the more substantiated ones, there are very few indeed. So absolutely not. Dolls would not be more likely to be haunted than anything else, and you see this in accounts of hauntings. They just don't show up that often, therefore it cannot be true. The thing most likely to be haunted actually is a house or a room or other location, not an object, although certain objects are historically said to be haunted, and there are examples of that, but usually it's actually a location. Now, if an object is haunted, such as a doll, what does that mean? Well, to be a true haunting, there should be a spirit involved, a ghost, if you would, who is caught between the worlds, not fully crossed over. And sometimes much of that spirit is crossed over, but part is still tied here. Other times, all of it is still tied here. And that will vary with the occasion. But what it comes down to is that part of that soul is still wrapped up in this world, and sometimes they are wrapped up with that location or a certain object. And so yes, an object can be haunted, and that is certainly a thing that can happen, and a doll can be haunted, but it's not a particularly common thing to encounter among stories of hauntings. And I'll give you an example to illustrate this point further. If you had, for example, a little girl who loved her doll very much, and she died in childhood, yes, her spirit could still be tied to that object because she had loved it so much. And in that sense, you might have a haunted doll. However, the manifestation that you're experiencing might not actually be a haunting. It might be instead the energetic charge that she placed into that doll unconsciously by the strength of her emotions that she was pouring into it. In which case, there is no spirit, it's merely an energetic effect, which is another matter. A lot of objects that might be said to be haunted are actually simply carrying a strong energetic charge, and there is not an actual spirit involved. But sometimes there is. There's also the theory that when a spirit is involved, it is to a certain extent a kind of imprint of the strong emotions that they felt during certain times of their life. And this basically goes back again to what I was saying about how it can be a portion of a spirit that is tied to that event. Not necessarily the entire spirit. It's very much like when you work with soul retrieval. Parts of the energy of the soul are caught in certain events. And through soul retrieval, you liberate that energy. Haunting is the same thing. Part of that soul's energy is caught in that lifetime, in that location, in that object, whatever it is, and is holding part of them there. So that has to do with what a haunting is. And a poltergeist is a very different thing. And a poltergeist basically is a matter of ungrounded energy. There is not a spirit involved with a poltergeist. There is an energetic event going on. And with a poltergeist, it is commonly associated with things like objects moving of their own, furniture shaking, things flying off of shelves, etc. And this is something that happens with seriously ungrounded energy. And a poltergeist experience will usually center on either an adolescent child, occasionally a menopausal woman, and sometimes a psychic who is not in particularly good control of their energy. In all cases, it's a person at a place in life where they have an awful lot of energy coursing through them. In the case of the adolescent or the menopausal woman, it's hormonal. In the case of the psychic, it has to do with raising but not grounding energy. But in all cases, it's unbalanced energy. And it will cause that phenomenon, and the answer is really simple. You just ground the damn energy. It's not a horror story, it's not a horror movie, it's not even particularly exciting when you come down to it. You just ground the energy. But people don't like to hear that because it's not so dramatic. But that is the truth of the matter. And many of the things that people like to make into big dramatic horror stories are just little poltergeist experiences that could have been very easily handled if only someone there knew how. And I mentioned that this sometimes happens around people who are practicing the psychic or magical arts, but are not practicing them especially well and don't know to ground down that energy. When it happens with an adolescent or a menopausal woman, and it can happen also with other kinds of conditions which cause huge amounts of energy to flow through the person, if they knew how to ground the energy, the problem would go away immediately. Usually, the person who this is going on around is to some extent an open psychic, but usually completely unaware of it. But if they could be taught good psychic hygiene, the matter will clear up immediately. Now, with a haunting, if it's an actual haunting where a spirit is involved, the correct thing to do is to help that spirit to cross over, to release what has bound itself to, and cross over wholly into the other world. And that too is not as dramatic as a lot of people would like. You don't make horror movies out of that easily, but it is the actual metaphysical answer to the situation. How common are actual hauntings versus energetic charges versus poltergeists? They're relatively common, but I think that more commonly it's a poltergeist situation. But these two things manifest in very different ways. People who do not have a background can confuse them, but if you have a background, you can recognize the difference pretty much immediately. In all cases, it's basically a simple matter. With a spirit, you help it cross over. You help to untie any energy that is bound. With a poltergeist, you ground the energy, and you should ground the energy in every event that involves this kind of happening. And generally speaking, you'll find that's all that's really needed. Some years ago, I happened to watch a series of programs on the paranormal because a friend of mine was watching them and I was at their house, and they were binge watching the episodes. And in almost every episode, the paranormal team decided that there was a demon in the house, and it was terribly dangerous and very, very dramatic. And then you listen to the story, and if you have a background, you would notice it was a poltergeist. Simple to deal with, no drama, but of course that doesn't make a television program. One of the things I think is hard for people to deal with in metaphysics is that it's not as dramatic as you're led to believe it is. It can be very fulfilling, it can be very interesting, but if you're looking for high drama and you're looking for a constant adrenaline rush, that isn't necessarily what you're going to find. And you're not going to find constant frightening, scary situations unless you make them. And there are certainly people who do that, but it's not how you should be pursuing metaphysics. It's not necessary, it's not practical, and it's not inherent to the situation. It's a matter of how you react to them. Generally speaking, if you react in a sensible way, you can handle whatever is before you. And if you understand energy, and you understand the nature of the soul and how it can be energetically connected to a place or a thing, it's all fairly simple to deal with. So, those are my thoughts on the matter. I'm sure someone will scream, "Oh no, you should be terrified!" But you really shouldn't. So, I hope you find that helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be. Please join me for our Corellian peace prayer. I pray for peace. I pray for love. I pray for stability. I pray for the nation where I live. I pray for the world. Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you for Pagans Tonight Radio. Pagans Tonight Radio is an online radio network with different hosts and different shows 7 nights a week. There's something for every taste, including Spanish language programming on Saturday evening. Check out paganstonight.com today.